Welcome to Empathy Stories, where we explore life's most profound lessons through heartfelt tales of love, betrayal, and resilience. Today's story is about Hannah, a woman whose strength and grace in the face of public humiliation teaches us the true meaning of self-respect and letting go. Let's begin. It was an unusually warm afternoon in the middle of December when Mark gathered his family in the living room of their spacious home in Connecticut. The air was festive, filled with the mingling sounds of clinking cutlery, casual conversation, and soft laughter. Yet, the mood shifted as Mark stood up, his posture straight, commanding attention. He tapped his glass lightly to silence the room, the glint in his eye betraying the significance of what he was about to say. Hannah, his wife of 10 years, sat beside him, her hands resting lightly on her lap. Her calm demeanor suggested she already knew what was coming. Mark cleared his throat. "I have something important to share," he began, his voice carrying just enough authority to hush the remaining whispers in the room. He glanced around briefly, savoring the moment, as if he were the protagonist in some grand drama. His gaze finally settled on Hannah, whose serene expression never faltered. "I'm in love with someone else," he declared, loud and clear, ensuring everyone in the room could hear him. "Her name is Rachel, and we're going to be together. I want a divorce." The room fell silent. Hannah, dressed elegantly in a soft blue dress, looked up at her husband. Her gaze was steady, her eyes reflecting neither anger nor sadness. The family members around them shifted uncomfortably, their eyes darting between the couple, bracing for the emotional explosion they expected. But it never came. Instead, Hannah tilted her head slightly, her voice calm as she responded. "I know." Mark faltered for a split second, the smugness in his expression replaced by confusion. "So, you agree?" he asked, almost uncertainly. "Yes," she replied, her tone unwavering. "You want a divorce? You'll have the divorce." Her words were like the quiet resolve of someone who had long since made peace with an inevitable storm. Mark's confidence quickly returned. He hadn't expected such composure, but he assumed it was her way of masking the pain. "Good," he said, smiling faintly. "I'll have my lawyer contact you." "But," Hannah interrupted, her voice slicing through his words. "There is one condition." The family leaned in, their curiosity palpable. Mark raised an eyebrow, intrigued. "What condition?" he asked, certain it would be something trivial. Hannah leaned forward slightly, her eyes locking onto his with an intensity he hadn't seen in years. "You will never appear in my life again. No calls, no visits, nothing. You walk away today, and you stay away. Forever." Mark blinked, momentarily caught off guard. This was not the reaction he had prepared for. He had expected tears, maybe even a desperate plea to work things out. Instead, Hannah had drawn a line in the sand, and the cool finality of her words left him unsettled. "Are you joking?" he said, laughing nervously, though her expression told him she wasn't. "You won't see me again? Is that what you want?" "It's exactly what I want," Hannah replied, her voice as steady as ever. "And it's what you'll want too." "Mark, believe me." The tension in the room was suffocating. No one dared to speak. Hannah's faint smile, one Mark had never seen before, lingered like an unspoken challenge. There was no anger in her eyes, no bitterness, just an unnerving calm that made him feel, for the first time, that he wasn't in control. After the family dispersed and the house quieted, Hannah sat alone in the kitchen, the silence amplifying the weight of the moment. She wasn't immune to the pain of what had happened. It was there, lurking in the corners of her mind, but she refused to let it consume her. As she washed the dishes from the gathering, her best friend, Clara, sat nearby, watching her with a mixture of awe and concern. "I don't know how you're managing this," Clara said, her voice thick with emotion. "If it were me, I'd be falling apart." Hannah paused, drying her hands on a dish towel before turning to her friend. "What would falling apart change?" she asked, her tone soft yet firm. "It won't undo what he did. It won't make me feel better. All it will do is give him the power to ruin me." Clara's eyes filled with tears. "But doesn't it hurt? He humiliated you." "Hannah," and in front of everyone. Hannah touched her chest lightly, as though cradling the ache within her. "Of course it hurts," she admitted, "but I won't let that pain define me. I choose how to react, and I choose peace." Meanwhile, miles away, Mark was finding it difficult to reconcile what had happened. He had expected drama, tears, maybe even a fight, but Hannah's calm acceptance haunted him. She didn't react. He muttered to Rachel as they sat together in their modern apartment. She didn't yell or cry. She just agreed. Rachel, scrolling through her phone, barely looked up. Maybe she already knew, she replied dismissively. Mark frowned. Her indifference annoyed him, but he let it go. Still, the memory of Hannah's unshaken composure lingered, unsettling him in a way he couldn't explain. He had expected to feel triumphant, but instead, there was a strange hollowness in his chest, a gnawing feeling that he had miscalculated something significant. As the days passed, Mark buried himself in his new life with Rachel, eager to prove that he had made the right choice. But even as he attended luxurious dinners and enjoyed the attention his new relationship brought, Hannah's parting words echoed in his mind. For the first time in his life, Mark began to doubt his control over the narrative he had so carefully constructed. And Hannah? She began to rebuild. Quietly, steadily, she focused on herself, her friendships, and the small joys that made life meaningful. She chose not to dwell on the betrayal, understanding that her strength lay in her ability to move forward. Though the pain lingered, she refused to let it anchor her to the past. For Hannah, this was the beginning of a new chapter, one she would write on her own terms. Mark's new life with Rachel initially felt like a dream. Their sleek apartment in Manhattan was a world away from the cozy, understated home he had shared with Hannah. The city buzzed with energy, and he basked in the attention their relationship drew. Mark loved being seen as the man who always came out on top, the one who could leave his old life behind and step into something bigger, shinier, and more exciting. In those early days, everything seemed perfect, but perfection is often an illusion, and cracks began to appear almost immediately. Rachel, who had once seemed so vibrant and engaging, started to withdraw. The long, laughter-filled dinners were replaced by silent meals with Rachel scrolling through her phone. Her affection grew cold, her smiles increasingly rare. At first, Mark dismissed it as the natural ebb and flow of a relationship. But soon, he began to notice the subtle changes that couldn't be ignored. It started with Rachel's unexplained absences. Work meetings, she would say casually, grabbing her coat and leaving without elaborating. Mark told himself not to pry. She was ambitious, after all, and he admired that. But when these meetings became more frequent, and her returns home grew later, unease crept into his mind. The apartment, once a symbol of their new life together, began to feel strangely empty, even when Rachel was there. One evening, as she stood by the mirror applying lipstick, Mark couldn't hold back his curiosity. "Everything okay?" he asked, trying to sound casual. Rachel didn't look at him, her focus fixed on her reflection. "Of course," she replied with a lifeless smile. "Just a lot going on at work." The explanation didn't sit well with him, but he let it go. Mark had always prided himself on being in control of his relationships, his career, his reputation. But for the first time, he felt that control slipping away, and the sensation was deeply unsettling. At the office, the tension followed him. The whispers, the knowing glances. It wasn't long before he realized that his colleagues were talking about him. Not to him. Mark, the man once feared and respected, was now the subject of quiet ridicule. He heard snippets of conversations in the hallways, his name always accompanied by stifled laughter. "Did you hear about Rachel and Greg?" someone whispered as he passed. Everyone knows, except Mark. Mark froze, the words hitting him like a punch to the gut. Greg was one of his employees, a younger, confident man who had always been polite but distant. The idea that Rachel, the woman for whom he had left everything, could be involved with Greg felt impossible. And yet, the whispers continued, each one cutting deeper. That night, Mark sat in the dimly lit living room, the silence around him oppressive. He had always thought of silence as a sign of peace, but now it felt suffocating, like the walls were closing in. When Rachel finally walked through the door, casually removing her coat and dropping her bag on the counter, Mark's frustration boiled over. "Are you cheating on me with Greg?" The words spilled out before he could stop them, his voice trembling with a mix of anger and desperation. Rachel paused, her expression frozen for a moment before she let out a short, humorless laugh. "Did you really think you had everything under control, Mark?" she asked, her voice cold, her eyes filled with disdain. Mark stared at her, struggling to process the weight of her words. "I gave you everything," he said, his voice breaking. "How could you do this?" Rachel sighed, her tone dripping with indifference. "You gave me nothing, Mark. You took, you manipulated, and I played along until I didn't need to anymore." Her words were a blade, cutting through the last remnants of his self-assured image. Mark's world, once meticulously crafted, crumbled in an instant. Samantha grabbed her bag, her expression one of complete detachment. "Good luck with what's left of your life," she said, the sarcasm in her voice lingering in the air as she walked out the door. And just like that, she was gone. Mark stood in the middle of the room, the weight of her departure settling over him. He had built his life on ambition, control, and the belief that he could always shape the outcome to his advantage. But now, as he sat at the kitchen table staring into the darkness, he realized just how wrong he had been. The next morning, the office felt like a foreign place. The whispers didn't stop, and the looks of pity and thinly veiled amusement from his colleagues were unbearable. Mark had always been the one in power, the one people looked up to or feared. Now, he was the subject of ridicule, a man undone by his own choices. That evening, he returned to his empty apartment, the silence louder than ever. He poured himself a drink, his hands trembling as he picked up his phone. Hannah's name was still saved in his contacts. He stared at the screen, his thumb hovering over the call button. She was the one person who had stood by him, who had believed in him before he had thrown it all away. And now, in his darkest moment, she was the only person he wanted to talk to. Taking a deep breath, he pressed the button. The phone rang once, then twice, before a familiar voice answered. "Hello?" Hannah's tone was calm, steady, as if she had expected this call all along. Mark's throat tightened. "Hannah," he began, his voice trembling. "It's me, Mark." There was a pause, and when Hannah spoke again, her voice carried an air of quiet curiosity. "What do you want, Mark?" He closed his eyes, struggling to find the words. I just wanted to talk, to see how you're doing." Her response was swift, cutting through the pretense like a knife. "Do you really want to know how I'm doing? Or are you just trying to ease your guilt?" Mark's chest tightened, the truth of her words leaving him momentarily speechless. He had reached out not out of concern, but desperation, and Hannah saw through him, just as she always had. "I know I messed up," he said finally, his voice barely above a whisper. "I know I hurt you, but I've lost everything. Hannah, I don't know what to do." The line was silent for a moment before Hannah responded, her voice steady but firm. "What happened to you, Mark, was your choice. You made the decisions that brought you here. And now, you're looking for someone to save you. But I'm not that person anymore." Mark felt the weight of her words settle over him like a heavy cloak. For the first time, he realized just how much he had taken for granted and how much he had lost. And as the silence stretched between them, he understood that Hannah had moved on. She had found the peace he had tried so desperately to destroy, and she was not about to let him disrupt it again. The silence on the phone was deafening. Mark held his breath, hoping for something, anything, that would give him a sense of reprieve. But Hannah's calm, unshaken voice on the other end offered no solace, only the truth he didn't want to face. "Mark," she began, her tone steady, almost compassionate. "You were always obsessed with control. You needed everything to revolve around you, your decisions, your wants, your life. And now, when you've lost that control, you've come to me. Why? Do you think I can fix it for you?" Her words cut deep, but Mark knew she was right. His throat tightened, and he forced the words out. "I don't know, Hannah. I feel so lost, Samantha betrayed me. My colleagues laugh behind my back, and I have nothing left. Hannah sighed softly. For a moment, Mark thought he heard a trace of sadness, but it was quickly replaced by the firm resolve he had come to expect from her. Mark, you lost everything because of the choices you made. You chose to humiliate me in front of our family, to abandon the life we built together. And now, you want me to give you something. What? Forgiveness? Closure? I can't give you that. Mark's heart sank. He had imagined this conversation would bring him a sense of relief, perhaps even redemption. Instead, it only deepened the pit of despair he had dug for himself. I'm sorry, he whispered, his voice breaking. I'm so sorry for everything I did to you. Hannah's response was quiet but resolute. I'm not angry with you. Mark, I've let go of that anger a long time ago. I had to, for my own peace. But forgiveness doesn't erase the pain. It doesn't undo what's been done. He could almost picture her sitting by the window of her new home, serene and composed, the way she had been when she accepted his divorce announcement without a tear or scream. That image, once infuriating to him, now felt like a testament to her strength he realized he would never have. I don't want you to hate me, Mark said, his voice barely audible. I don't hate you, Hannah replied simply. Hating you would mean I'm still tied to you. But I've moved on. Mark, I've built a life where your actions no longer define me, and I won't let you disrupt that. The silence that followed was absolute, heavy with the weight of unspoken words. Mark wanted to plead, to argue, but he knew it was useless. Hannah wasn't the woman he had left behind. She had grown, healed, and found a strength that no longer relied on him. Hannah, he started, but his voice faltered. I wish I could go back and do things differently. Her response was as gentle as it was final. You can't. Mark, none of us can. All we can do is live with the consequences of our choices and try to be better. I hope you find what you're looking for, but it won't be with me. And with that, she ended the call. Mark sat in the silence of his empty apartment, the phone still clutched in his hand. The weight of his actions pressed down on him like never before. He had always prided himself on being in control, but now he realized that his need for power and dominance had left him utterly alone. Samantha had betrayed him. His colleagues despised him. And Hannah, the one person who had stood by him for years, was gone. Not in anger, but in peace. And it was that peace, the calm in her voice, that haunted him most. Hannah, meanwhile, set the phone down and gazed out the window of her new home. The evening light bathed the room in a soft golden glow, and the faint sound of children playing in the distance brought a smile to her face. She felt a sense of closure, not because she had spoken to Mark, but because she realized that his pain was no longer her responsibility. She had chosen peace, and she would continue to live in it. Her life was far from perfect, but it was hers. She had rebuilt herself from the ashes of betrayal, surrounded herself with friends who lifted her up, and pursued passions that brought her joy. She no longer lived under the shadow of Mark's decisions. Instead, she lived for herself, embracing each day with the quiet strength she had discovered within. Mark's story serves as a poignant reminder that control and power mean nothing if they come at the expense of those who care for you. His downfall was not just the betrayal of others, but his betrayal of himself, his values, and the relationships that once gave his life meaning. Hannah's journey, on the other hand, is a testament to the power of resilience and the importance of letting go. By refusing to be defined by her pain, she found the strength to move forward, proving that true peace comes not from revenge or validation, but from choosing to live for yourself. And so, their lives diverged, one a cautionary tale of hubris and loss, the other a celebration of strength and self-discovery. In the end, the lesson was clear: peace is not something others can give you. It is something you must create for yourself. Mark's story is a cautionary tale about the consequences of pride, control, and selfishness. He built his life around power and dominance, believing that he could manipulate people and outcomes to suit his desires. In doing so, he destroyed the relationships that truly mattered. His betrayal of Hannah and his relentless pursuit of what he thought was a better life ultimately led to his downfall. Mark's journey reminds us that control is an illusion. And when we prioritize ego over empathy, we risk losing the very foundation of our happiness. His regret comes too late, leaving him alone to face the consequences of his choices. Hannah, on the other hand, embodies resilience, grace, and the power of letting go, faced with public betrayal and humiliation. She refuses to be defined by her pain or Mark's actions. Instead, she chooses peace, rebuilding her life with dignity and strength. Her decision not to hold on to anger or seek revenge reflects her understanding that true power lies in mastering one's emotions and prioritizing self-respect. Hannah's journey shows us that letting go isn't about forgiving for the sake of others. It's about freeing yourself to live a life of fulfillment and joy, no longer tethered to the past. Together, their stories reveal the profound importance of accountability, self-worth, and healing. Thank you for joining us on this emotional journey of redemption and resilience. Hannah's story reminds us that true strength lies in choosing peace over revenge and self-respect over bitterness. If this story resonated with you, please like, share, and subscribe to Empathy Stories for more inspiring tales. Remember, life's greatest lessons often come from the most difficult moments. Until next time, take care and stay strong.